Good evening and welcome to the December 18th, 2017 regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council. First item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to invite Cub Scout Pack 1440 from Fields Road Elementary to come to the podium and lead us in the pledge. Everyone, please rise.
Cubs face the flag.
Face the flag. Turn around.
Turn around. Scout salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job.
Turn to your seats, Cubs.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. There was a lot of energy with that pledge. Next item on our agenda is reflection. I'd like to call for a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. Next, we have approval of minutes. Tonight we have one set of minutes to approve from the meeting on Monday, November 27th. What is the pleasure of the council?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm going to abstain, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so that carries 3-0, one abstention being Councilmember Spiegel. Next, we have appointments. Tonight we have several appointments and reappointments. What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move a resolution of the City Council confirming your appointments and reappointments to the Education Enrichment Committee, Environmental Affairs Committee, the Multicultural Affairs Committee, the Old Town Advisory Committee, and the Senior Advisory Committee. To the Old Town Advisory Committee, our friend Yvette Monroe, to serve an indefinite term. To the Senior Advisory Committee, there's Yvette again, for a 2-year term, and Mary Hoffereck, 2-year term to expire December 2019. To the Education Enrichment Committee, Laureen Thomas and Stacy Simon, both terms to expire in December 2019. To the Environmental Affairs Committee, Ed Mitchell, a 2-year term to expire December 2019. And to the Multicultural Affairs Committee, Valerie Palmer, term to expire December 2019. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries 4-0. Yeah. Yeah. If anybody I see, I know at least a couple of the people are in the room tonight who just were appointed. If you can please rise, those who were just appointed, Mary, that you too. Yvette, state your name and your committees.
Yvette Monroe, the Senior Advisory Committee and Old Town Advisory Committee.
Mary Sane.
Mary Hoffereck, Senior Advisory Committee.
Let's give them a round of applause. Serving on a city committee is a great way to get involved and help provide valuable guidance and support to the mayor and council in the city. So we hope our Cub Scouts, when they come of age, will consider doing that themselves. Next, we have presentations, and I'd like to invite Stephanie Walker, our Director of Finance Administration, to the podium to lead us in our comprehensive annual financial report.
Thank you all. The city has completed its fiscal year 17 comprehensive annual financial report and subsequent audit of that, and it was filed on time with the state by October 31st, along with our state uniform financial report. I would at this time like to take the opportunity to thank the finance staff in particular, as well as many of the other departments that assist us with this effort. It's always, we forget how many things happen during the year oftentimes, and then we get to the end of the year and we're kind of recreating records, not recreating, but digging up records throughout the year for our auditors, and sometimes that involves many departments, so we appreciate their help. as in past years, our financial report is listed on our website and can be accessed within the finance department there. I would also like to mention that our fiscal year 16 financial report received Government Finance Officers Association, it's a mouthful, certificate for excellence in financial reporting award. We do anticipate that the fiscal year 17 report will be submitted to them and receive that same level of award.
We're on sort of a streak with those awards, right?
Well,
Yes,
don't
many
jinx it.
years. Let's knock on wood. At this time, I'll turn it over to our external auditors to complete the required communications to you and also be on hand for any questions.
Great. Welcome.
Good evening. My name's Dan Kenny. I'm partner with Towne Resnick, and with me is Fulla Mastro Vasilis. She is the manager on the City of Gaithersburg audit. We're here to present the June 30th, 2017 audit. Included in your CAFR document is the independent auditor's report. And the independent auditor's report indicates that we've audited the entity as of June 30th, 2017. It talks about management's responsibility. Management is responsible for the fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And under auditor's responsibility, it talks about our responsibility, and we are to issue an opinion. And you have received an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion, and that means that your financial statements are fairly presented for the year ended June 30th, 2017. On the second page of the independent auditor's report, it talks about required supplementary information, and that's because in your document you have an MD&A section and you have some supplemental schedules in the back. It talks about our procedures there. And also in your independent auditor's report, it talks about other information. It talks about our responsibility with respect to the intro section, the statistical, and some of the combining statements as well. Because your audit is conducted in accordance with government auditing standards, we issue a report on internal control over financial reporting, and that document you should have in front of you now. Okay, so we'll go through that very quickly. Okay, there's two sections in the internal control over financial reporting report, and one item is the internal control over financial reporting, and that indicates that you do not have any material weaknesses for your audit. And then also under compliance and other matters, it notes that there were not any instances of non-compliance noted during the course of our audit. So those are two very important items for you to take away from the internal control report. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Fulla, and she's going to go over the required communications.
Thank you.
Good evening. The required communications are professional standards require us that we provide you information about our responsibilities related to generally accepted auditing standards. And it's split up into three sections, so I'll go through it section by section. Under significant audit findings, there's a section called qualitative aspects of accounting practices. In this section, it basically states that there were no new accounting policies that were adopted, and that the application of the existing policies were not changed from the prior year. We noted no transaction entered into the city during the year that lacked authoritative guidance or consensus, and all significant transactions have been recognized in the financial statements. As we go further in the document, it also talks about significant accounting estimates. There are a few, and I'll just go through those right now. Management's estimate of depreciation expense is based on the estimated useful life of the related assets. Management's estimates of the net other post-employment benefit liability and related deferred outflow of resources is based on the actuarial valuation report. The management's estimate of accumulated vacation leave, which is also recorded as compensated absences in the CAFR, is based on payroll reports. On the second page, they talk about management's estimate of the allowance for doubtful accounts, which is based on past experience of collections. All of these estimates were deemed reasonable in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole. There were no difficulties encountered when performing the audit or the completion of the audit. For corrected and uncorrected misstatements, there was a schedule that was previously provided to you that summarized uncorrected misstatements to the financial statements. Not all of these were deemed immaterial, both individually and in the aggregate to the financial statements taken as a whole. There were no disagreements with management. There were certain representations that were requested of management that were included in a representation letter dated October 23rd, 2017. There were no consultations with any other accountants made during the audit, and there were no other audit findings or issues noted. On the last page, we discuss other matters. Here is where we talk about what was applied to the management discussion and analysis and the required supplementary information. These supplement the basic financial statements, and our procedures consisted mainly of management inquiries regarding the methods of preparation and also comparing the information to the audited financial statements. We did not audit the RSI, and therefore we do not express an opinion or provide any assurance on the RSI. We were also engaged to report on the combining individual and non-major fund financial statements and the general fund budgetary comparison schedules, which also accompany the financial statements but are not RSI. With respect to these statements, we made certain inquiries of management and evaluated the form, content, and methods of preparation to determine that the information complies with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. The method had not changed from the prior year, and the information was deemed appropriate and complete in relation to the audit. We were not engaged to report on the introductory and statistical sections, which accompany the financial statements but are not RSI. Such information had been subjected to the audit procedures applied in the basic financial statements, but we do not express an opinion on it or provide any assurance on it. And that concludes the required communication.
Okay, so just to conclude, as you know, we work with management to, perform the audit and go through all the records, but we work, for you. So feel free at any time to ask us questions now or during the course of the year. We're the independent auditor, so once again, we work with them, but we work for you. So I want to emphasize that point.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate your work, appreciate your partnership, and happy holidays.
Yep, you too. Thank you.
And we have Stephanie Walker back to the podium to talk about, give us an update on our investment portfolio.
Thank you for your continued time and attention tonight. We have slide deck. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. Approximately a year and a half ago, the city implemented a new investment strategy. And as part of that process, we issued a solicitation for a municipal investment advisor and selected PFM Asset Management. We then worked with them to update our investment policy and complete some cash flow projections, and then established two different investment portfolios. A short-term, which is consisted of assets that are less than 1 year in maturity, which we hold about $11 million in, and a longer-term portfolio with investments between 1 and 5 years, and that has approximately $67 million within that. Previously, all of our assets were held at Maryland Local Government Investment Pool. I'll call that the state pool as we continue through this, or the Montgomery County Investment Pool. And those are great instruments. We do continue to use the state pool currently. However, they are fully liquid funds. And so, when you look at investments, one of the ways that you can look at getting some additional yield is to lock in terms of things rather than having everything be completely liquid. So this slide just shows how the allocation has changed over the last several years. We implemented the investment policy approximately April of last year, so the last quarter of fiscal year 16. Excuse me, when I say last year, I'm still in a year arrears, I guess, being an accountant. And then in fiscal year 17, we had the investment strategy in place for the entire year. So you can see how the local government investment pool, which is that bigger block, had reduced, but it is still being actively used. This then just summarizes the total composition across all of the investments. Approximately a third of our cash and investments remain within the state pool. A little bit under 1/3 then is in U.S. Treasury securities, 25% within U.S. agency securities. Those are things like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Federal Home Loan Bank, and then the remainder is in primarily liquid things, or commercial paper, which is 9 months or less. And feel free to stop me as we go through this, or you can wait till the end if you have questions.
No bitcoins, right?
No.
Okay, good.
Not an authorized investment.
Good. That's good to know.
And this slide just takes a slightly different look at the portfolio rather than in the type of investment. It looks at the maturity. So we still are relatively liquid, 49%, and that provides us, liquidity for our normal operating cash needs, as well as any capital projects that would occur. You'll notice that while we do go out 5 years, not all of our securities are within the 5-year term there. And in our longer term portfolio, we have an average duration of about 2.5 years. So that could be generally thought of as, approximately half of those assets are invested in under 2.5 years, approximately half of them are over 2.5 years. So that just gives a general breakdown of how that is managed. This to me is kind of the most exciting slide here.
Yeah.
The line on the bottom with sort of the larger squares there represents the state pool's average annual returns for the last 3 years. So those are on fully liquid funds. They do comply with all of the Maryland state statutes as far as what they're investing in, but they're liquid. And so while it's not exactly apples to apples when we compare our portfolio to the state pool, because we do have fixed income investments, they have a term associated with them. I think it's applicable to show it because that's sort of, the generally thought of as the alternative investment or the other option of what we had been doing. So I like to show them to make sure that it's worth our time to continue with the investment portfolio. And so what we saw is, fairly substantial increase, especially in fiscal year 17 over the pool rates. I would say, not quite double what the return is. That's a little bit hard. I should probably not use the term double per se, because we wouldn't anticipate being more than twice that level on a given year. But given where the investment rates have been in the past, that seemed to have worked out fairly well. What we saw then in fiscal year 15 is that our accrued interest, net of our fees that we're incurring for the investment advisor, we were about $547,000 more through the use of the advisor and having the investment portfolio than we would have had we continued to just stay in the state pool. So I'm pretty excited with seeing those levels of return. I would anticipate that increasing. And the rates right now on a 1-year treasury are now over 1%, which is the first time we've seen those returns since 2008. So thrilled to see the market is finally helping a little bit on the investment side of things. But so we anticipate that would continue to increase.
Yeah, aside from the time period from the Great Recession onward, historically the numbers are much higher than the numbers you're talking about. So
right.
We should do much better. And, this is not tax money. This is just interest on the money we have. So it's great.
And that was really all I wanted to go through with you tonight. I just wanted to provide an update so that we're aware of where we were with this process, because it has been in place for a little over a year now. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the presentation. It's really exciting. It's good to see this paying dividends. Come on, I guess you get a little kudos for that. Go ahead, Ryan.
I had just a couple of quick questions. First, for the benefit of the public, as a reminder, can you just go over how, as a government entity, I think under state law, we are limited in the types of investments we can make in our portfolio. I want folks to know we're not, just putting risky investments out there with the taxpayer dollar. For example, Bitcoin. But that we actually have a specific set of types of investments that we are limited to under law. And maybe you could just kind of give a quick reminder of that.
Absolutely. So the state is very restrictive in what we're allowed to utilize. Generally speaking, it's items that only have the highest credit rating through a Moody's or a S&P as far as their rating process has gone. U.S. Treasury securities, certainly that is, one of the higher quality, items. We are restricted in, we don't do any stocks. the commercial paper is the only thing that we have that is even marginally touching, corporate type items, but it is a debt security. And primarily, the agency securities are also, they're not guaranteed by the U.S. government, but there is an implicit guarantee of, or if you want, we'll call it a moral guarantee that the U.S. government has said, hey, we have these semi-related agencies that are issuing debt that we would be able to utilize. There are a few other items that we are eligible to invest in, things like municipal bonds. The city does not issue municipal bonds, but we would be eligible to utilize other municipalities' debt as an investment. We have not, chosen to incorporate that in the portfolio at this time, but that would be another option.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other quick question. In the fine print of the last graph, it mentions that this excludes unrealized gain and losses. Can you just sort of talk about sort of how we account for unrealized gain and losses in the portfolio? And obviously they're not gains that are locked in, but there may be some reflection out there of what our investments are doing that is not actually reflected in this chart, right?
Yes, absolutely. So it's actually one of the few accounting standards that I can say that I am not a huge fan of, and that is, so our interest revenue, if you take a look at our financial report, is made up of really three components. The first is the interest, the cash that we actually receive in hand that's paid to us because of interest earnings or dividends. The second is if we sell something for a gain or a loss, and let's say we had $100 and we sold it for $105, that would be a realized gain. And then the third is unrealized gains and losses. And so unrealized gains or losses come about because the interest rates are constantly changing. So if I issue or if I purchase an investment today, let's say the interest rate is 1% on it, and tomorrow interest rates go up to 2%, we would show an unrealized loss on that investment, because if you were issuing the same or purchasing the same exact instrument today or tomorrow, it would be providing a higher level of interest. So the market takes that into account and revalues the security. Now, if you are intending, which is the majority of the time, we typically purchase and hold our investments until they actually mature. So we're not selling them during this time frame. When the investment actually returns, we get the full face value for that investment. The full face value would be if we invested $100, we would get $100 at the end of it. And so during the term of investment, the market value of it will go up and it will go down and it will go up and down. We are required under accounting regulations to record that within our revenue. But because we typically hold our investments to maturity, it's not something that necessarily makes sense to utilize when you're looking at your investment returns.
Okay. Thank you.
It may be a little bit longer-winded than you intended.
No,
I'm
that's
sorry.
good.
Very good.
Neil?
Okay, well, I share the general excitement. I can see all the Cub Scouts here are very excited by all this financial reporting as well. And I'll tell you, as you know, we've had this conversation. I think 5 years ago, I looked at the city's financial statements and was kind of shocked at how little the city was earning in interest on a lot of money in cash reserves. So seeing this extra $500,000 a year and growing coming in, that is not because we're taxing people, just because we're investing is awesome. Just one quick question on the portfolio composition. I see 40% is, almost 40% is still in the liquid category. Do you anticipate that remaining at that level, or will we be investing a higher percentage or lower percentage going forward?
What we do is on an annual basis, and I should specify that does include our funds that are at the state pool. So it's not necessarily all just sitting within a checking account, not earning any interest. So some of that is incorporated in the state pool.
But it's still a very low earning category.
It is. They're actually up to I think 1% this month. So I mean, low, but the advantage to the liquid funds is they're able to take advantage of the raising rate environment a little bit faster than sometimes the longer term investments do. So that is a component of that 40%. So maybe a little bit misleading that it looks like we have a lot that's completely uninvested. But what we'll do is on an annual basis, we complete a cash flow projection. We'll take a look at what is the low points of the year and the high points of the year. What do we anticipate for capital spending? That's a little bit hard to project sometimes because we have some pretty big capital projects on deck that, depending on when, the contracts are signed, depending on when we actually make cash payments, we need to make sure that we have the funds available. I'll note that, any one of our investments, because they do have a market value, it is something that we could sell if we needed to, but we prefer not to have to do that. So we do tend to keep, funds on hand to avoid some of that.
So basically, just
we'll reevaluate it every year.
To sum up, right, you're going to look every year.
But it's not something that I'm poised to say that we have established a particular target because of
so it's
how
really
the cash
based
projections.
on cash needs each year.
Right.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
So a couple quick questions. So we're completely out of the county pool. What would our return look like if we had stayed in that pool? Do you have any idea?
They have, I believe, only one other municipality that's still in their pool, so I'm not sure. They don't necessarily publish what their rates are. They did tend to be slightly higher than the state pool. The way that that their mix of investments worked is they would have some that were term investments, and then probably at least 50% was also the state pool. Mm-hmm. And so it was a little bit of an oddity there to be in both the state pool and a county pool that had half of the funds in the state pool. So because they had so few investors with them besides just the county, they didn't necessarily have the same infrastructure as far as online banking balance review and that sort of thing. So other things the investment kind of drove some of that decision.
Okay, and then we're looking at the rate of return on that last slide. We're only halfway through 17, so this is kind of a snapshot this year. Are we given the
fiscal year?
The fiscal year, right? So we're only halfway through. Oh no, that's the complete. We're in 18 now, so yeah, that's pretty cool. What's it look like so far halfway through 18? Do we have an idea?
I think through first quarter we were at about $250,000 through, without having the exact dollars, here. That was where we were through the first quarter. So, good. I have not projected for the rest of the year. Certainly, we have a fair amount of term investments that we'll be looking at when we go through the budget process. We'll be trying to get a little bit tighter on what the rest of this year looks like. Given the rate environment increasing, I'm thinking probably a little higher than we did last year. So that would be my general projection, but given the level of investment has not decreased and the raising rate environment being higher.
Yeah, so the Fed, I guess, Chairman Yellen announced that they were probably going to have at least 3 interest rate hikes in the next 12 months, so we should be looking at this optimistically. So,
yes. Yeah, from what I was reading today, they're looking at another one later this month. So,
well, it's all good news. So, thank you.
Yeah, just a question. I'm not sure if you'd even know this, but with 56% of our investment in federal securities, has the discussion about the debt ceiling impacted our thoughts on portfolio management? I know last week, for example, there was chatter about suspending payments on the G fund for the TSP in order to stay under the debt ceiling. Does that cause us to stay up at night?
It doesn't. It's all, all of the debt is previously issued as well as, guaranteed by the U.S. government. If the debt ceiling is reached, they'll have trouble issuing new debt. But, paying off the old, probably not too much of a problem. So it's not something that we've really, factored into the strategy. In particular because of the limited selection of securities that we can actually invest in. Yeah.
Maureen.
Yes, so I wanted to ask about the PFM acronym.
I know it's the
I
public.
believe it's public finance management, but they don't usually spell it out. They usually just go with the PFM asset management.
Okay, because I know that with making language more accessible, I want to make sure that we're not using too much jargon, so I had to look up what the PFM meant, but I'm glad I assumed correctly. So outside of pensions, what else would this fund be used for, where we would borrow against it? Because I know you mentioned the capital projects that we have outstanding. What else?
So I should specify, this does not include any of our pension funds. This is strictly our operating funds. This also does not include our other post-employment benefit cash or investment balances. So this is strictly
just for
the funds that the city holds for operations and capital projects, stormwater management. It's not something that we borrow against. We would typically save up for our capital projects, and then we would spend these funds down as cash needs arrive.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. If you have other questions on this or on the financial statements, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Next on our agenda is public comments. This is a time where anybody who'd like to speak to the mayor and council about any topic that's not a public hearing topic, this is the time, and it's perfect tonight because we have no public hearings, so you can speak about whatever you would like. We ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. State your name and address or neighborhood or firm for the record. When your time's down to 30 seconds, the timer will beep and turn yellow. When your time's up, it'll beep and turn red. Who'd like to be our first speaker?
What'd you say to clear the room, Mr. Mayor?
No one wanted to hear. The Cub Scouts had no interest in public comments tonight.
They told us they were
Just when it gets interesting.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, Council Vice President, council members, thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. For the record, my name is Richard Rothrock. I'm the Government Relations Manager for Crown Castle, overseeing the deployment of small cell facilities in Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. Our customers are the major wireless carriers whose names you would be familiar with, as well as the residents of Gaithersburg who rely on them, and the networks that we help provide for cellular phone service and wireless data.
Rich, I'm going to put you on pause just a sec. I've paused your time. If there's anybody else who's in the audience and wants to speak about the small cell topic, I just want to make a note for the record that our record on the matter is closed, and so we're not allowed to consider any new information presented this evening, but you're welcome to testify.
Understood.
Okay, go right ahead.
We have a strong track record of working with counties and municipalities in the state of Maryland, including the city of Westminster, Carroll County, Howard County, the city of Baltimore, as well as the town of Ocean City. But while we have worked in good faith and appreciate the council's willingness to address some of our concerns, we would respectfully ask the council's delay tonight's vote so that we can collectively work with the community, develop regulations that will both safeguard residents and allow for the responsible and reasonable deployment of small cell technology in the city of Gaithersburg. The regulations before you today will simply not allow for the best deployment of small cell technology and unduly restrict the number of carriers each node will be able to support. In fact, that may lead to the development of more small cells in the city of Gaithersburg, not fewer. As we outlined in our letter dated October 31st, the equipment size and placement restrictions and the antenna node placement restrictions make it nearly impossible for us to properly deploy small cells and ultimately provide services in Gaithersburg. We know that small cell technology and 5G comes with job growth, economic investment, and development. Next generation wireless technology provides the infrastructure needed for municipalities to improve their transportation systems, their public safety, and improve smart energy features. Most notably, 80% of 911 calls are placed from a wireless device, making reliable service more important than ever. Adopting the regulations as written today would limit small cell deployment in Gaithersburg and put the city at a competitive disadvantage to the surrounding municipalities, ultimately hurting both long-term growth and the residents of Gaithersburg. Further, while the city has attempted to address some of these issues in the current draft, there has been no opportunity for the community or industry partners to comment on the revised ordinance published Thursday of last week. And the draft regulations continue to bar placement of wireless facilities in large sections of the community where they are needed most. As we have said before, this isn't just a policy mistake, it may well run afoul of federal law. As more and more people use their smartphones as their primary computers and look for them for their news and video content, as well as their primary phone inside the home, strong, robust wireless coverage is more important than ever. Increasingly, people are going to ask, how fast is the broadband? Not just just
Is this
ask
the last
how
sentence,
good
Rich?
they are, the schools, yes.
Okay,
Yes, thank you.
thank you. Do we have any other speakers this evening? Going once, going twice, okay. Then we will move on to, thank you for your testimony, Rich. We will move on to from the mayor and council, where we're going to start with Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Ashman. So just a few things today. First of all, happy Hanukkah to those who celebrate, and since we won't see you again before Christmas, happy Christmas for those who celebrate that one. First of all, had a really nice event at the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce's annual dinner and awards. It was great to see all the local business people who attended and the award winners who were very well deserving. Also, we had a delegation from the Chinese city of Shenzhen who came to visit us, along with one of the local pharmaceutical companies that is based out there. Shenzhen, if you're not aware, is a city of about 20 million people across a waterway from Hong Kong. About 40 years ago, there were about 80,000 people there, and now there's 20 million. And if you have an iPhone, it's already been to Shenzhen. So anyway, it was really interesting. I expected that we'd be talking about pharmaceuticals, but they were really talking about food safety, which was kind of interesting because they're trying to figure out how to feed safely 20 million people every day. So we learned something from the county representatives who came to join us. And finally, the Transportation Planning Board Long-Range Task Force met last week and made recommendations out of the list of 10 projects and plans that we were considering. We're recommending 5 of those 10 to the Transportation Planning Board at its monthly meeting this Wednesday. Those plans look like they will alleviate a good portion of the increased transportation congestion over the next 25 years through land use and transit and roadway projects. So I'm encouraged by the fact that we were able to create a process that is regionally focused rather than taking a lot of projects that are good for local areas but don't really improve transportation for the general region. It still remains to be approved, and some of the plans require changes in land use policy that are generally outside the jurisdiction of the TPB, but hopefully the data will be useful to land planners throughout the region, and we'll be able to reduce the amount of time we all spend sitting in traffic and get the region moving better. So I'm sure you'll hear from me more on this subject as we go forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Neil. Gloria.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So it's been a busy 2 weeks. Let's see, Neil already mentioned that we attended the Celebration Awards dinner hosted by the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce. I provided remarks at an event in Rio last Friday to welcome Senator Van Hollen to the city of Gaithersburg, which was really fun. It's my first official event as a city council member. This week, well, over the weekend, I attended the National Association of Counties Achievement Award celebration. I received an award for the Community Action Board's Leadership Development Institute program. This initiative is open to residents making $54,000 or less. The Institute provides training to help residents gain advocacy skills and offers hands-on opportunities for them to also get involved in important issues within their community. So you can always look this great community program up. We attended the committee for Montgomery annual legislative breakfast as council. We witnessed the gubernatorial candidates as they responded to a few questions. So it's going to be a busy 6 months until primary day. I attended with my council colleagues the MML annual legislative dinner with county council members, and I think this was the first year that the Board of Education members were invited. Councilmember Spiegel rallied the crowd around our statewide initiative, so it looks like we have our work cut out for us going into the session, but a clear vision for what we want to accomplish. This past weekend, the Quince Orchard Library had their grand reopening, and I was there on behalf of the mayor and council to help with the ribbon cutting and really just welcome the library back to the community. Now we have 2 libraries in the city of Gaithersburg that our residents can access. What else? And lastly, I learned that the Montgomery County Libraries is offering free animation workshops for children on December 27th at 10:30 a.m. at the Gaithersburg location on Montgomery Village Avenue. So you can look at Montgomery County Public Libraries for more information about that. What else? So yes, that was it. And like Neil said, we won't be here next week. So I just want to wish everyone happy holidays and best wishes for a blessed and prosperous new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll echo what's already been said, wishing everyone happy holidays, happy Hanukkah to those who are celebrating, and I'll take a point of personal privilege to wish both my kids a happy birthday. It's been a very busy December in my household. I was sorry to miss the Chamber of Commerce dinner, which I usually go to, but my duties as the statewide MML legislative chair brought me to Prince George's County that night, where I was honored to rally the troops there in Prince George's County with the many municipalities in our sister county who are also active with MML, the Maryland Municipal League, and talk to them about our statewide legislative priorities. That was a great event, so thanks to the Prince George's County Municipal Association for hosting me. On December 12th, along with statewide president and president-elect of the Maryland Municipal League and our staff, I went down to Annapolis to meet with the Chief of Staff for Senate President Miller to talk to him and his Chief of Staff about our MML priorities. We had a very productive meeting with her, but unfortunately a day or two after that meeting she announced that she's going to a different position and he's getting a new Chief of Staff. So I guess we'll be going back down to Annapolis shortly to meet with the new Chief of Staff. But I just wanted to keep the public informed of my activities there. On December 13th, I attended the annual meeting of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. This was my last meeting serving on the board of COG. Councilmember Wu is going to be rotating on, and I had the opportunity briefly to introduce him to 1 or 2 folks there for the luncheon, and we had a really good presentation from the Lieutenant Governor-elect of Virginia, who was our keynote speaker. Prior to the luncheon, there was a very important meeting of the COG board that was sort of the culmination of a lot of work over the last year or two to develop policy positions on WMATA, Metro Rail investment, to make sure that our Metro Rail system in the DC area gets the investment that it needs to really get it back to being a standout public transit system in our nation's capital to be able to serve all of us. So we did have a final vote on an important resolution to support dedicated funding from all of the regional partners who fund Metro, the Commonwealth of Virginia, State of Maryland, District of Columbia, and the federal government, setting forth a template for what we thought made the most sense in terms of how much contribution each jurisdiction ought to make over the next several years. And as timing would have it, I think just today or yesterday, the governor of Virginia announced a plan to implement revenue source, I guess, dedicated revenue sources in the form of certain real estate taxes and other dedicated funds for Metro. And our hope is that the other jurisdictions will follow suit and that we will be able to invest the approximate $500 million a year extra that Metro needs really to get back to being the stellar, well-maintained system that it needs to be after some years of struggle. So we'll see what happens there. But certainly that'll be something that will come up in Annapolis during the upcoming state legislative session as well, and we'll see how Maryland intends to do its part in that formula. Lori Ann already mentioned the Committee for Montgomery and the Montgomery County Chapter MML dinner, both of which I attended, and both of which were great events, so thanks to all involved in that. And then finally, I just want to wish everybody who celebrates a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I want to put in my annual plug for the Sober Ride program. This is a time of year where we go to a lot of holiday parties, and the cocktails can flow, and the glasses of wine can flow, and certainly on New Year's Eve, that is the case. The Washington region has a program called Sober Ride, which is run by a nonprofit organization called the Washington Regional Alcohol Program. Through apps, through your phone, through the web, you can arrange to get a free ride home from any of these social events or anywhere where you've had a little too much to drink. Please do not drink and drive. If you don't want to get a sober ride, or you don't want to wait for a cab or an Uber or a Lyft, then make sure you have a designated driver with you. It is a time of year where I think the risks of impaired driving go up, and I think we all need to be vigilant. So please do take advantage of those services, and that's all I've got this evening.
Thanks, Ryan. Mike.
Thanks for that reminder, Ryan, about Sober Ride. I think the one ride you don't want to have that night is a ride from a police officer to booking. So remind you to look up Sober Ride. So happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, happy Festivus, happy Solstice celebration, and happy Christmas, whatever you celebrate. I hope you're able to enjoy that celebration with your friends and family all around you. So and Sober Ride might be important in allowing you to celebrate that as well. So since our last meeting, the mayor and I attended the Gaithersburg Chorus 30th annual celebration of their existence. Gaithersburg Chorus is a non-audition course. Anybody can, all you have to do is bring a singing voice. So it was great to be there. They had a couple of the original members of the Gaithersburg Chorus. So also attended the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce annual celebration. So I want to congratulate all the new board members. I want to congratulate past President Colette Relaford on a very successful year. I think membership continues to grow. And I want to congratulate Barbara Cruz on her election as the president for 2018. And that's it. Just hope everybody has a happy and safe holiday, and we'll see you after Christmas.
Thank you, Mike. Rob.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm pretty sure I attended a lot of the events that have been mentioned, so I won't go through those. And I'll just leave it with happy holidays to everybody and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. I'll join everybody in the happy holidays remarks, and all the events I've attended have been mentioned already, so I'm going to skip that. And just note officially that there will not be a work session next week due to the holidays. The next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be on Tuesday, January 2nd, 7:30 p.m. here at City Hall. And we will move on to from the City Manager.
Thanks, Mayor. Very briefly, the historic preservation element of the city master plan is out for comment, and I wanted to specifically highlight the work of Chris Berger, our historic planner. I think he's written a nice update. They've gotten a number of comments already from the public. It's often hard to get comments on those types of issues, but they've got a nice coordinated plan working with PIO and with direct mail to get comments on the element. And that seems to be going really well, and it'll be a model for other elements as they come through the 10-year cycle. And then, just like I did, I believe, the last meeting of last year, just want to, since the year is concluding, just on behalf of staff to thank everybody up here the more, as I said last year, the more we interact with some of our peers in other municipalities and counties, the more we appreciate the work that we do together and the support that we receive from the elected officials at all levels, but especially from the city council. So thank you from the staff.
Thanks, Tony. Next, we have our economic development update. Tom Lonergan.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. My comments are concise. The Old Town Park Plaza project, as you see, it's not done yet, but we did want to let you know that while it is slightly behind schedule, we had expected completion certainly by this point in the year. A variety of issues did cause delays, including unanticipated required waivers from WSSC, the principal culprit, as well as some changes in subcontractors. That said, momentum is picking back up. Installation of the fountains is underway. Majority of the concrete has been poured, and additional pavers are going in this week. Benches have arrived. Installation will follow the fountain concrete and paver work. Electrical work has yet to be finished, and plantings will, of course, be installed early in the spring. And shortly thereafter, we will be cutting a ribbon there. So apologies for the delays, but we're getting back on track. Secondly, and finally, recently the Montgomery County Planning Department had undertaken a county-wide economic competitiveness retail market study. The study was prepared by StreetSense, a Bethesda-based retail design and strategy firm. Purpose of the study was to assess the strengths, challenges, and competitive position of retail in the county and to develop strategies that will help retail centers keep them poised for the future. It's an interesting study, actually, that's quite detailed, yet pretty easy to navigate, and if anyone's interested, it can be accessed within the county's planning department website. In addition, Heather Arnold, Director of Research and Analysis from Streetscape, will be our keynote speaker at the city's Economic Development Committee breakfast scheduled for January 19th next month at the Kentlands Mansion to discuss the study as well as online shopping influence on retail and commerce in the suburbs. The event is open to the public. Should anyone be interested in attending, it's free, but we'd like RSVPs if possible, so please contact myself or Sharon in the Economic Development Office. And happy holidays.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Tom, putting you on the spot without you knowing that I'm going to be asking you about this issue? I read in the local media today that L'Académie de Cuisine is closing. They are not technically in the city of Gaithersburg, I believe, but just wondering if your department had been watching that or heard about it and had any reaction to it yet or not.
Candidly, we had not. We're, of course, always disappointed to see a known entity go under, but it's not in the city, and they had not reached out to discuss the situation for us, so we wouldn't have been aware, but we were brought aware in the Business Journal as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Next, we're going to move on to consolidated policy discussion and invite Lynn Board and Joe Van Eaton to the table.
Thank you. Thank you. We have before you this evening amendments to 3 chapters of the City Code, chapters 19, 20, and 24, dealing with small cell facilities. We are going to be conducting this as a consolidated presentation and discussion, but when you get to the ordinances, we need to do separate votes on each ordinance. So I give you that as kind of some background. As the Mayor and Council are well aware, this is an issue that we've been discussing for quite some time. While these ordinances were technically introduced on July 17th of 2017, they were introduced following 3 separate work sessions on April 11th, 2016, April 1st, 2017, and May 22nd, 2017. And the purpose of these work sessions was to obtain public input and input from the industry as well, and guidance from the Mayor and Council as to how you all wanted us to approach these issues. For all of these, we held open quite long records in order to invite as much public participation and participation from the industry as possible. So they were introduced in July of 17. On October 2nd of 2017, we had our consolidated joint public hearing. We did hold the record open for 50 days to November 22nd, 2017. And again, that's an unusually long record for us, but again, it was a calculated decision to invite as much input as we could on these issues. On November 3rd, the Planning Commission record closed, and on November 15th, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of all the ordinances before you this evening. And then on November 22nd, the Mayor and Council record closed. The council may be aware that we have received some comments subsequent to the close of the record, and I would just remind you that those comments are not included as part of the record and should not be considered by the council this evening. So the proposed amendments that are before you this evening are part of a comprehensive solution that the city decided to pursue to address the installation of small cell equipment in our community. So we have taken a three-pronged approach, being the ordinances that are before you now, comprehensive regulations that will be before you later this evening, as well as 2 standard agreements, a franchise agreement and a master license agreement. Those 2 agreements will be back before you on January 2nd for you all to approve template agreements. And then we will begin the process of negotiating individual agreements with our industry partners in this. So the changes to chapters 19 and 20 are pretty minimal and pretty straightforward. They basically incorporate the new regulations. To chapter 24, which of course is our zoning provisions, they're a little bit more comprehensive, and we have amended those provisions to update our definitions, to allow these facilities in the public right-of-way along with the franchise and license agreements. It allows stealth installations on residential dwellings, and it establishes new requirements for size, location, and other regulatory requirements. Since this has already gone through detailed presentation at both introduction and public hearing, I don't intend to go through kind of verbatim all the sections of these code changes, but certainly we are available if there are any questions. Since the public hearing, we did receive a number of public comments. Those were included in your agenda packets. So staff, following that public comment period, did meet along with outside counsel to review all of the comments from both the public and the industry, to take a look at the comments to see if any changes should be incorporated into our ordinance. And several of these changes at staff recommendation should be incorporated. In Chapter 19, we've added a new definition for private facilities, and this was one of the concerns that came from the neighborhood. To Chapter 20, there were no recommended changes. And in Chapter 24, to address some of the comments and concerns from the industry, staff is recommending we increase the size for strand-mounted facilities to 2 cubic square feet or less. There would still be, that's within a 50-foot radius of each other. So again, to review the process, these ordinances are ready for final adoption this evening. They would be effective on January 7th, 2018 if they are passed tonight. We've also, while typically our regulations go into effect immediately, we would want the regulations to go into effect at the same time as the ordinances. So we're recommending that if you choose to adopt those, that they would also be effective on January 7th. As I said earlier, the agreements for the templates will be back before you on January 2nd. So again, before the ordinances and the regulations go into effect, and then we would begin the process of negotiating individual franchise agreements. I do want to note that on a final review of the ordinances, particularly Chapter 24, we found 2 very minor corrections that we do believe need to be made. What is your page 56, and I believe Councilmember Wu pointed this out earlier today. We're missing a one word, being an and. So it is in the definition of telecommunication facility. So staff would recommend that that be amended. And then also...
I'm sorry, Lynn, what section is that in on that page?
It's in section 24.1. It should be page 56 of the agenda packet, but also it's page 3 of the Chapter 24 ordinances.
Right, I'm just asking where in
Where
that
in
It's
section.
right at the
Paragraph.
very top where it says, you'll see that there's language that is being struck, and then in parentheses, it says, if not a personal wireless service, then we need to add an and, Wi-Fi services to the public.
I think our pagination is different.
No, it's,
No,
it's
it's there.
56
It's the-
here,
the
so
top of the page.
59 of the package.
So is that inside the parentheses? It's outside the parentheses?
It should be right after the parentheses.
Okay.
Just need to add the word and.
And.
No, go to 56.
It's right here.
PDF
The
page
word
58.
and right there.
Yeah. See, yours are
Oh,
on page
yeah.
3 of the memo. I have
56.
different pagination. Yeah,
Yeah, 'cause you're
page three of the
Yeah.
The document.
Yes,
of the document.
and it's right at
PDF
the top.
58, 59.
It would be in the second line from
Got
the top.
it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the next change would be,
Yeah, right here.
uh,
And be
it looks
Wi-Fi.
like on page 103 of your packet or page 19 of
Mine
the
says
ordinance.
56.
And it's in subsection 18. And we're missing the word by. So
Yeah,
we
right
want
here.
the fifth line down.
Which
we-
page is this on?
What's the
It
PDF
should-
page?
It should be page 103 of the packet or page 19 of the ordinance itself.
Yeah, it's on 101 for some reason. Anyway,
So-
yeah.
Where does so it's under 18.
Subsection 18, and the
Yep.
fifth line down starts, that term is defined, it should be by applicable federal
Got it.
law, so we
Got
just
it.
need to add the word by.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
And then we have one change to chapter 19.
Beats me.
Luckily, that ordinance isn't nearly as long. And that's on the second page of that ordinance on page 325 of the packet. In the definition of private facility, which is the new definition that we've added, we want the sentence to end at the end of rights of way, so we would strike such as cable, fiber, or telecommunication providers.
Is there a reason why we're striking those?
And again, that was at the recommendation of outside counsel, that there is some question in the law with regard to how cable providers and some of the other providers are treated.
Where is it?
Private facility.
A private facility.
So you just recommend striking the illustrative language?
The such as, yeah. Correct.
Okay.
So staff would request that the ordinances be approved with those amendments.
Okay, so just so we're all clear on what we're doing here, we're gonna take 3 votes first on the ordinance changes, and then we're gonna move on to the regulation. I would assume, since the ordinance changes are largely just saying that we're referring,
Adopting the regulations.
we're adopting the regulations, that the real substantive policy discussion will be with the regulations. But now's the time, if anybody would like to make any statements about any of these 3 ordinance changes. Who'd ever like to go first, go first.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I could suggest this, and I don't know if it's okay in terms of the way the agendas are working here. I realize we're going to take separate votes on the 3 ordinances and a separate vote on the regulations, but since they're all sort of interrelated, it would seem to me to make sense that if anybody has any sort of global comments on the whole package, to make them now, even though the regulations are listed as a separate agenda item. Is that okay, Lynn?
Yeah, that does make sense.
Okay, I'm fine with that, go right ahead.
Okay, rather than wait until the regulations, I'd rather do that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right, thank you. So as Lynn referred to, this process has been many months in the making, and the issue is, I think it's fair to say, exceedingly complicated. So first off, I just want to thank our staff, particularly Lynn and Dennis and Frank, and also our outside counsel, for your diligence in researching and presenting and answering questions, and drafting and editing several complex documents as part of this process, so thank you for that. We have been quite deliberate and careful to study the relevant federal laws and regulations, and that's both our staff and our mayor and council. And we've engaged in a pretty extended public record process, as Lynn explained, to accept and consider both verbal and written comments from residents and industry representatives and anyone else who wish to submit their thoughts or questions. We have not engaged in this process kind of willy-nilly. Rather, we've taken great care to listen to and consider all the properly submitted comments, and we really do genuinely appreciate the level of engagement from residents and businesses, industry, and all interested parties in this important discussion. And while we certainly understand the different groups have concerns and opinions over different aspects of the proposed ordinances and regulations regarding distributed antenna systems, I have considered the entire public record, and in light of the facts and the law, I find, at least for me, that the city's proposed ordinances and regulations do not encroach upon those areas of regulation that are preempted by federal law and federal regulation, and that the city's proposed ordinances and regulations are reasonable and justified and within the city's authority to impose and enforce. I think it's fair to say the city recognizes and supports the economic benefits and services that wireless providers provide to our community. The intent of the proposed ordinances and regulations is to balance the benefit of those services with the impact on our residents and neighborhoods, and to reasonably regulate the use of the city's public rights-of-way, not only by wireless service providers, but by any utilities and other public or private entities seeking to install or operate facilities in the city's public rights-of-way, in line with those aspects and only those aspects that we have the authority to address. I have concluded from the record considered as a whole that the proposed ordinances and regulations provide adequate safeguards to ensure that they do not effectively prohibit the provision of wireless services. Regulation is not tantamount to prohibition, and I'm not persuaded, frankly, that the proposed ordinances and regulations make deployment of distributed antenna systems impossible. Rather, I think they exercise the city's permissible authority to regulate within reason, while still falling within the boundaries of federal regulations in terms of what our authority is. Anytime a regulation is passed, it has the potential to create additional requirements or different requirements for the regulated parties, but that doesn't mean that it makes the regulated activity impossible. The regulatory and technological landscape is certainly changing, sometimes rapidly, and in recognition of that reality, it's necessary to adopt updated laws and regulations in our city to deal with such developments, so long as those laws and regulations comply with federal law and stay within the bounds of our authority, which these do. However, in recognition of the fact that such change will inevitably continue beyond tonight, we have purposefully designed the proposed updates as an ordinance that contains a basic framework on the one hand, with the details filled in by regulations on the other hand. We've done so because regulations can be updated more nimbly. So if technological standards or demands do continue to change, we can address those rapidly as that happens in the future by simply amending regulations when appropriate without the burdensome requirements for lengthy proceedings. We have done this precisely because we recognize the benefits that ever-evolving wireless services provide to our community. But that inevitable evolution, in my view, is not a reason to delay tonight's vote. On the contrary, the speed of this transition is all the more reason to make sure we have reasonable regulations on the books sooner rather than later, and the fact that such regulations can be amended with relative ease means that we can work with all stakeholders when situations arise that justify tweaks to our regulations in the future. And so for those reasons, I'm going to be voting in favor of the ordinances and the resolutions tonight, and the regulations tonight, rather. And I just want to make a quick comment about the suggestion from some to reopen the record. I find that reopening the record at this late stage is not warranted. The matter was duly advertised. The public record was open for more than adequate time, as Lynn explained. And despite the fact that really we were not required to do so, we also voluntarily held a public hearing on the proposed regulations in addition to the required hearing on the proposed ordinances. We cannot reopen the record every time a draft regulation is tweaked in response to public comment. Doing so would create a sort of absurd result in which no item is ever really finalized because it keeps going back to public hearing after every change. And I think it's worth noting many of the alterations already made to the initial draft of the regulations are in direct response to comments received, including those from industry. The public record closed for the ordinances on November 22nd, and for the proposed regulations on October 31st, as Lynn already noted. I have not considered new submissions received since the items' respective record closure dates because I find it would not be appropriate to do so. So that's my position on that issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to make a statement?
I'd like to read exactly everything that Ryan just said.
Just mention TPB to make it your own.
Not relevant here.
Yeah, it's like Ryan read my mind, so I appreciate your thorough recap of that. Basically, I think it comes down to that our work on this, and again, thank you, as Ryan pointed out, thank you to staff, Dennis, Lynn, Joe. And I want to also thank our residents for their participation in this process as well. I think that's been very important, and I think overall our intent is to balance the benefits and the impact of this deployment of technology and the ability to do it. So I'm prepared to vote in favor of the ordinances and regulations tonight. So, and again, thank you to Ryan for an excellent summary. It's good to have an attorney on among our colleagues as well. So.
Speaking of attorneys,
what were you saying earlier, Rob, about
was he
attorneys?
looking in my direction? I don't know. I'd also like to commend both staff and our outside counsel for doing a very able job here in addressing concerns raised. It's gone over a year now that this process has gone. We've been, I think, very transparent. We've been very engaging, both with the public and industry. I appreciate the input from industry to help us along the way in crafting our ordinance that will permit the reasonable use of both private land and rights of way, because this is a important technology. It's an evolving technology, and it's coming. I'd also like to thank and express my appreciation for the residents of Gaithersburg who also provided significant input. It was very helpful from all angles to figure out which direction we should be going here. Just to address the request from the gentleman from Crown Castle, first off, thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for your company's involvement in the process here. I'm kind of hesitant in that I'm always willing to consider additional information, but I think that there has been a transparent process. There's been a lengthy amount of time to provide comment here, and as Ryan stated, I think the way that the regime here has been drafted from an ordinance regulatory process, it does allow for the nimble adjustment if nimble adjustments need to occur. So I would just say that while I'm inclined to go forward today with the vote, that of course as we go forward, I'll welcome comments and input from both industry and our residents to see if we need to adjust something, we'll adjust something.
Lorianne.
Okay, so I find that the city's proposed ordinance and regulations are reasonable and justified. I too recognize the benefits that wireless services provide to our community and want to make sure we have reasonable regulations on the books sooner rather than later. And as Ryan mentioned, the public record has been open for quite some time, and I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues in thanking our staff for bringing me up to speed and their diligence and patience in researching and preparing comments and responding to questions. And just, yeah, I'm ready to vote.
Thank you. Okay, so let's take these one at a time then. The first item is CTAM-7665-2017, What's the pleasure of the council?
So moved with the small grammatical amendment proposed by staff tonight.
Second.
Do we actually have to state the change, or can we just say that?
You can reference.
We already read them into the.
Yeah, I think because they've been read into the record, that
Okay,
they're
read them into
sufficient.
the record.
Yeah. Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 5-0. And Rob, congratulations for catching those small grammatical.
It's the lawyer in me. It's the fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, those were good ones. Okay. Next is the ordinance to amend Chapter 19. What is the pleasure of the council?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
There's
Also with the
A
corrections.
friendly
Also
amendment
correction.
to the movement to
Okay.
accept those corrections.
Second amendment.
Are we?
Neil, did you do the? Who said so
I
moved?
did.
Do you want to amend it? Move it with the amendment?
I will move it with the friendly amendment.
Who
And
seconded?
I will second that.
Okay.
with
All
the
those in
friendly.
favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 5-0. Next, we have the ordinance to amend Chapter 20.
There were no technical changes on
There
this
were
one.
no amendments to chapter 20, yes.
Okay.
So moved.
Do we have that?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. Okay, now we move on to the policy discussion of the resolution. And what is the, or do we want to go through, we have a presentation on the
Short
resolution,
presentation.
even though we've already sort of.
We'd be happy to not do that, but we probably should. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight we're going to give you a brief presentation on the regulations related to the right-of-way. And just for the public, remember we've been focusing on the small cell facilities, but the regulations also deal with all other utility companies that use the right-of-way or anyone else who uses the right-of-way. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. I'll do a brief background. Here are some significant dates. Kind of also wanted to give a more global picture of the process that was conducted. Lynn mentioned this during her presentation, but I think it's important to reiterate how long the city has been working on this and how much public comment period we've had. Again, we really actually began this process in April of 2016. After that point, we held a number of work sessions where we took in public comment. The process became a little bit more formal, where the current draft documents were introduced in terms of concept. I'm not sure if the council remembers, but we made a brief presentation talking about the various components back in May 22nd of this year. And we, at that time, established a 30-day comment period. That was not part of the public record portion of this, but it was an initial stage where we were seeking public comment for both the general public and from the industry at large. Based on the concepts we presented on May 22nd and the comments we received, we did take those and drafted the initial documents that you actually have before you tonight, which were initially presented on August 21st, 2017. That's when they were actually introduced along with the ordinance provisions. The Mayor and Council then held a public hearing on October 2nd of this year, where the public was again asked for additional public comment. We also requested that those be sent in before we actually made some revisions to the initial draft. To be honest, we did not receive any public comment at that particular time prior to the October 2nd hearing. We did reiterate at that time that we were looking for models from the industry and did not receive any at that date. The Mayor and Council held the public hearing on October 2nd, and the public record was actually closed on October 31st. We did receive a number of comments that Frank will kind of talk a little bit about and what reflected back into the changes to the document. I will note that we did receive public comments from a number of industry providers, Verizon, T-Mobile, Comcast, and Crown Castle. The majority of their comments were actually focused on the regulations that we're discussing tonight in terms of proposing some additional changes or on specific definitions in the ordinances. I will note that we didn't receive any examples of equipment for facilities prior to the close of record. We have received a few after this point, but we did not receive any prior to that. And we did encourage the industry to try to get early to the game and provide us those so that regulations could reflect that. And as noted here, we received about 20 changes that we're going to be looking at. Again, why are we drafting these comprehensive regulations? It's really in response to the telecommunications and wireless facilities, but we also realized that we were deficient in terms of actually having regulations related to all utilities operating within our right-of-way. We did look at all the applicable laws, including those from the Federal Trade Commission, when developing these regulations. Sorry, the Communications Commission. And again, as I noted before, there currently aren't any standards or regulations. We do have some that we've been following, but none that were adopted by the mayor and city council. Again, they're comprehensive in nature, and they comply with all the FCC regulations. And with that, I'm going to have Frank kind of go over the more specifics in the regulation changes.
And good evening, Mayor and City Council. Just briefly, just by way of what we're talking about, these are 85 pages of regulations. The reason why they're that long is not that we're so verbose, but because we're, as Dennis said, we're covering all installations in the right-of-way, which we have not before. So there are really four main sections: regulations applying to all installations, then additional for right-of-way work, and that in many cases non-wireless right-of-way work. Then there are two more sections, one dealing with wireless facilities overall, used to provide personal wireless services, and then standard conditions for installations on city-owned poles and streetlights, where we have some proprietary interests as well. So, as we can see from the PowerPoint, there are some changes included here from the original proposal. There were at least 15 comments, and there are 20 changes to address some of the concerns. So what are some of these? Many of the comments from the industry were focused on size, and in some cases, we agreed with some of the changes they were talking about. So one change is to alter the size of the standard and sub-size equipment housing. These are the equipment that would be on poles, to increase, in some cases, the width and also the height, both of the standard and the sub-sized equipment housing. Also revising the size limit on the Omni Dome antennas, again, allowing the width to the size of the pole based on their comments. Also modifying the 500-foot spacing requirement at intersections. So we've kept it in there, but at intersections recognized, based on some of the comments, that alone could make it, could be a problem and very difficult to get around. Two other changes, and these are the only other changes that I know of that are in the regs that we left out and needed to be consistent with the ordinance. If you recall, there was a change from a 1 cubic foot limit to 2 cubic feet, and for the regulations, where this has an impact is where a master permit is not required. It's a change on page 3. It goes from 1 cubic feet, we would recommend, to 2 cubic feet, again, to be consistent with the ordinance. And then there's also a definition on page 11 of the regulations dealing with the definition of the mid-wire base station. Again, that size, 1 cubic feet, but to be consistent with these other changes would simply be changed to 2 cubic feet. Additional industry requested changes. Yes, thank you. Adding a reference to the fact that PEPCO may not allow that electric meters be placed at least 8 feet above ground. So if they don't, or if the law doesn't allow it, there was a request for a reference to that, and we made that. We are recommending that change, and that's included in the packet. Requiring a written request with an explanation for standard-sized housing, but at that point, with a written request and an explanation that is a part of the record, then allowing the standard size, which is larger than the substandard size. We did receive comment on cooling, and this would allow for passive or active cooling as long as, in terms of active cooling, the standards are still met, including the noise limitations that are part of the regs. There was a comment on workers' compensation insurance terminology, which is actually a change we've also made to our contracts. So to be consistent, we've made that change here as well. Some other changes, some of which were recommended and some of which came about because of these other changes, adding a definition of equipment housing for wireless installations, just so that there's something to refer to. That's why you have the definitions there. Adding references to master license agreements, because that's part of that. These are all part of 3 different areas that are going on: agreements, regulations, and the ordinance. We did make some changes to the reservation system on recommendation and with input from outside counsel, which brought in some steps that other localities have taken, and we did substitute that with a more simple system. There were some changes not recommended, where the draft already addressed the identified concern, such as with some of the size concerns, where a requested change would have created contradictions or inconsistencies, especially regarding timelines, fees, and application requirements, where a change would have been contrary to the intent to create a fair, non-discriminatory permitting process, where a requested change would violate FCC rules, such as requiring additional radio frequency testing beyond that of what is already included in what the city would already require to ensure the FCC limits are met. And I should also note that there was no change to the provisions dealing with impossibility. In other words, if a provider comes forward and shows that there is an effective prohibition for what they are seeking to install in any area, there's a process to address that. There are some specific standards that do need to be met, but in many cases that would allow, not just in many cases, but if there is, it is demonstrated and shown that otherwise an installation would be prohibited and the services being provided would be limited, then that would be allowed to go forward, and that's included. That is included here, and that has not changed. Yes, and obviously you've heard about it already tonight, but the ordinance changes and then the agreements that have already been mentioned are the other 2 parts of the puzzle, and the agreements will be before you, I believe, in January.
So that, in essence, concludes staff in consultation with outside counsel are recommending the changes proposed in the draft packet with the addition of the 2 noted by Frank, which are on page 3 and 11, changing the 1 cubic feet to 2 cubic feet. As Frank noted also, that these regulations will become effective to coincide with the ordinance changes, and with the ability to have the franchise agreement and master license also approved by that date. So everything would be live basically on January 7th. As noted earlier, we do believe that as we work through the franchise agreement negotiations with individual providers, there will or may be necessary changes to the regulations, and we've accommodated that through the process to allow those to be changed through simple resolution. So we will be working with the industry when we get a little bit closer to some of the specific details on what they would like to install within the city of Gaithersburg. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. It's been a long time getting to this point. You guys have put in a tremendous amount of work. We really appreciate it. We have a resolution before us. What's the pleasure of the council?
I just had 2 questions. One deals with the rubric surrounding the effective prohibition. I know there was some question or debate about whether that meant effectively prohibiting the service, such as signals from T-Mobile, Verizon, Sprint, or whatever, or effectively prohibiting any particular company that provides that type of service from working or providing that service in that area. I know the FCC cases were trying to move in the direction of making that statutory interpretation be to the company, not to the service itself. How are we interpreting in our regulation? If you need me to clarify that a little bit, I can, because I see Joe kind of.
Right now, the effective prohibition standard is an effective prohibition on the ability of any person to provide personal wireless services. So it's an effective prohibition of the services. So as long as that's the law, that's what will apply. Should the law change, our effective prohibition standard is tied to the federal standard, as it has to be. So,
well, so my understanding of the current law, and I know it's not settled yet, is that the effective prohibition applies to, for example, if you have T-Mobile being provided in a certain area, and a company wants to come in and put a small cell facility providing T-Mobile, they couldn't argue effective prohibition because T-Mobile signals are already there. Or under what the FCC, they're arguing in one of the two FCC cases was, if you're not letting me as a company come in there to provide T-Mobile services, you're effectively prohibiting me from providing my service. I'm just trying to figure out which we're applying in our regulation, because it looks like we're trying to apply the latter.
the service is what we're applying. The service standard under the
So T-Mobile, Verizon, Sprint, not Crown Castle Mobility.
Right.
Well, whoever else wants to come in.
If Crown Castle wanted to build a facility for T-Mobile, as they often do pursuant to a contract, they would be able. They are able to complain if their request for a facility is denied, as long as they can show there's an effective prohibition on the provision of the service of their customer.
So do they? Okay. So they have to show that T-Mobile is effectively prohibited from providing services in that area. Not Crown Castle. I'm sorry to point out for Crown Castle, but he used that example.
That's the way the regulations read, and obviously, should the FCC adopt different regulations, we'll come back and revisit exactly how we apply.
Again, keep in mind, companies like Crown Castle are a third party. They're not actually the owner of the service. They are the provider of the real estate.
It wasn't quite clear to me as I was reading it. Maybe I'll take another look, but if that was the intent in drafting it. Second question is, there was certain comments in the provided by the public that pertain to the siting of facilities near sensitive areas like daycare, schools, and such not. I didn't see anything in the regulation that would either put you can't put them around daycares, or we strongly prefer you don't do it, so put it other places. Is that something that was considered, and if so, why didn't it make it to the regulation?
The main comments received from the public regarding that were related to the actual radio frequency issues, which we are prohibited by FCC to actually consider. We did consider other factors. Again, we're looking at small facilities. We're not talking about monopoles. A number of the comments that were contained in the public record were actually talking about monopoles. We do not allow monopoles within the right-of-way, but we did look at other structural issues. How is the pole fall, is it breakaway, and things like that will be considered as part of each application. So we did consider those things, but the main comments were focused so much around something that would be prohibited us from considering regarding the FCC regulations.
Now, setting aside ambient impact of radio frequencies, which I know we can't consider, you could consider, for example, public sentiment. And if the public seems to say, well, it just doesn't seem right to put them near daycare facilities, that would be something that would be, I understand we'd be able to consider. And I'll just throw that out there. I know regulations are pretty easy to change down the line. That would be something I'd be interested in delving into.
Again, we looked at balancing all the issues from the public and also balancing the industry needs.
No, it's a good balancing act. commend you on your work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Anyone else, or someone want to move the resolution?
I'll move the resolution with the technical amendments mentioned by staff, which includes changing from 1 to 2 on pages 3 and 11. Cubic feet from 1 to 2 on pages 3 and 11.
I'll second with that amendment.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From the city attorney.
Just to sort of follow up on a related issue, Dennis and I will be meeting again on Thursday this week with representatives from MML and MACO and the small cell industry regarding statewide legislation on small cells. So we'll keep you up to date on what transpires there.
Thank you very much. Anything from any other staff? Not seeing anything? Okay, as I mentioned before, we have no work session next week due to the holiday. The next regular session of the Mayor and Council will be on Tuesday, January 2nd, 7:30 p.m. I'll remind everyone that our Winter Lights program goes on through New Year's, so hopefully you can partake in that. Excellent display, and happy, merry everything. Wishing everyone a wonderful 2018. Let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.